Welcome back to Adam Saruwatari Extreme. Let's take a look at running costs for the year 2019 and specifically on the SV. We need to use the SV as a model because on all the other cars I do my own maintenance, so it's difficult for me to gauge what that cost actually is. But the SV is pretty simple because it's still under warranty, so I'm going to still send it back to Beverly Hills to have them service it. So if we take a look starting with the registration for this year is going to be $3,253. I'm going to have an insurance cost of $3,148, and this needs a second annual service, which is $5,804.06, which brings us to the grand total of $12,205.06 just to have the car without anything on top of that. That might seem kind of high, but we must keep in mind that the value of the SV is very high, so it's always relative. The more affordable vehicles have more affordable service. So let's take a look again at the registration. There's not a whole lot of ways to save money on registration unless you register in Montana, and I'm sure all of you are well familiar with what's going on with that, where all the states are cracking down because they don't want to lose their money. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere like Texas, where my friend Mesa at Lamborghini Houston always advises me that they pay way less and it's a much better deal. But unfortunately, I'm based in California, potentially the worst state to be in for expense. Insurance. I'm sure all of you shop around, such as I do as well, but all of it seems to be fairly competitive. I go with AAA because a lot of the shops I work with, if there is any damage, they always tell me AAA is one of their best companies to work with, so there's no delays in getting repairs done. Homeowners insurance, multiple vehicles, all these things generate discounts. So I've stayed with them. I've checked out other companies, but still the cost has been competitive. So something to look at, but I don't know, don't invest a lot in it. And then of course, the second annual service. That's pretty substantial, $5,804.06. Now I'll explain to you how that kind of worked when I checked into service, and possibly this will work for you. But I called around to several dealers just to kind of get a feel. And as soon as I told them second annual service, it was always right around the 6,000 mark. So when I talked to just a service writer, I mentioned to him, I was like, well, I only have 1,000 miles. Some service advisors just said, you need to do the second annual service to protect the warranty. And a few of them said, well, we could do without the spark plug change, which would save you around $2,000. Still pretty expensive, but definitely a good savings. So when I talked to Lamborghini Beverly Hills, their service manager, Mike, is a super good guy, and I've developed a good relationship with him. And you'll remember, I'm always telling you, try and develop a relationship with a service manager. When I explained to him the situation and just flat out asked him, Mike, with only 1,000 miles, is there any way to save some money and not affect the warranty? Well, luckily, he was super honest with me. He said, Adam, if you only have 1,000 miles, a lot of these items may not need to be dealt with. And right now, I'll go over the list of items so you have an idea of what that service entails. So you've got the engine oil and filter, changing out the brake fluid, changing out the transmission fluid, changing the oil in the front and rear differentials, changing the cabin filter, the engine air filter, the coolant, and the spark plugs. Changing the spark plugs at 1,000 miles seems a bit overkill to me, even the air filters. So luckily what Mike advised me was he would go back to the original service, which basically just covered the lubricants, and that ran about $1,000 to $1,500. That's a substantial savings. So it is important to ask a lot of questions to see if you can find out if something will work out for you. As far as running, that's about the best it's going to get as far as for me. So hopefully maybe that'll translate some of the things to you. Now, if we look at the original purchase price of the SV, there were some savings there that might translate to something that can help you. One huge benefit I got in the SV was it was purchased in 2017. At that time, you could still write off 100% of the state sales tax against your federal income tax. So what did that get me? That got me a $50,000 write-off against my income. That definitely helps. The problem is that it ended in 2017. But I have heard some information that if Trump is not reelected in 2020, then many things could get rolled back, possibly that. So if you're looking at a car, it might be something to consider. Now, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an attorney. My girl's an accountant, and I also have an accountant that specializes in exotic cars, racing. She's been with me forever. Both of them always advise me to tell you, check with your attorney and check with your accountant. But I can kind of give you a feel of what works for me and the advantages I've received, so then maybe it might work for you and be worth looking into. The first thing is that when this car was bought and my previous cars were purchased, there was very little write-off, but the laws have changed. So whether or not it's a new or used car, you can still get the Section 179 and the bonus depreciation, which is an $18,000 first year write-off, plus or minus. And when I was racing, to write off my exotic cars, it was roughly 30 years. The race cars are a completely different thing because they're pulled out of personal property, so they were 100% write-off. But cars, especially Ferraris, Lambos, the government isn't too keen on just allowing you to write them off. But they have accelerated that so you can write it off faster. Now, getting back to the sales tax, you can't write off the sales tax personally, but the way I understand it is that if you write it off to your business, the sales tax is encompassed in the purchase price, so eventually you would get it back. The trick is finding a business that would allow you to write this stuff off. I don't know, maybe you might think of like a YouTube channel, although it sounds a lot easier than it probably is. And again, check with your accountant and your attorney. So these are all things that could possibly help you to save some money. The advantages are pretty big. The unfortunate side is you need to get professional help and advice before you do it. So this car is going to head out to Lamborghini Beverly Hills. They're nice enough to send a transport. They'll pick it up and take care of it all for me. But before they do that, I will go ahead and take the underside out so we can take a look at it. So some of you that are interested in possibly servicing your SV or Aventador, you'll get a good idea. Now, do not take any of my advice on servicing. I'm just observing. I'll open it up so we can look at it, but that's it. I have not done the job. Anytime I give you technical information, I've either done it or I have the service manual, of which I have done neither this time. So let's go ahead and put it up in the air, take a look, and see what we find. To get access to the underside of the car, there are 3 undertrays, a front, center, and rear. And they are held on by tons of hardware. Torx screws that use a torque 30 and some that use Torx 20. You'll need to remove all those screws to pull everything down. What I started with was the center section first, which allowed me to then remove the rear and the front. When you pull the front, the only thing that I noticed that's a little bit difficult is coming in and out. It needs to go to one side or the other and then slide back. You'll see because there are brackets in the way. Other than that, everything was very straightforward. The SV is the only car I have with inboard suspension, so I'm not super familiar with working on it, but you can get a pretty good look at it here. It's pretty interesting. Of course, you have this lower arm connecting to the control arm, what looks like a giant rocker there, and then up on top, there's actually where the shock absorber connects to. And inboard there's actually the pivot point. Right here, you can see the stabilizer end link, and it connects up above to the sway bar. There's another view showing the arm, what looks to be the giant rocker. Here you can see the stabilizer end link connecting to the sway bar. The SV, as most of you know, has a monocoque. In simple terms, basically the entire driver's compartment is a carbon fiber tub. So there's subframes in the front and the back that are bolted and connected, and that's what all the suspension arms and everything come off of. Here's a good look at the front differential. From what I can see, there are 2 drain plugs and 2 fill plugs, which use an 8mm Allen or 8mm hex. You can see the lower control arm hanging right off of the subframe. My best guess is this is a transmission drain and that is a transmission fill, and they are also 8mm hex or Allen. This tan piece on the transmission housing looks similar to filters that I found on other transmissions. These bolts have an 8mm head. You can see right there where the rear subframe connects to the monocoque. That looks like the oil tank drain, and it takes an 18mm socket. This is a 10mm 12-point spline. This is what's used to remove what I believe are the drain plugs. This is the engine oil pan. The unusual thing is I count 7 plugs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is underneath the subframe bar. I have no idea if all of these plugs are used to drain the oil or just some of them. This looks like it would be the drain to the rear differential, and right up here looks like that would be the fill plug. They both use an 8mm Allen. This tan piece again still looks like a filter, the same type that was used on the transmission, and it looks like the bolts both have an 8mm head. For those of you that have Mercies and didn't notice when I was under the car, I have excellent news. The Aventador uses the same oil filter as the Mercy, the UFI 2328900. For me, this is great because it's one less different type of oil filter that I have to inventory. If I were really servicing the SV, there's one other issue that would have to be tackled, and that is the service indicator on the dash. There are a few options. The first two are rather pricey. You could use one of the Lamborghini computers, or you could purchase one of these, which is a Leonardo, which covers Lamborghini, Ferrari, and McLaren. This for me is a necessity because I'm so far away from the dealer. It allows me to make a decision on whether or not I should do the work here or I should send it out before it has to go to the dealer to be diagnosed. But the third option is by far the most cost-effective if you want to do it yourself. I've found that if you develop a good relationship with a service manager and he has the confidence in you that you have the skill set and you're actually doing the work as required, they will oftentimes reset the service indicator for you. This has been the case for me. So before I had the ability to do it myself, I would just get to know them very well, let them see that I do have the ability to take it on myself. But most importantly, I would still send some work to the dealer to always maintain that relationship. It's always good to have some sort of relationship with the dealer because at some point you will most likely have recalls or something else to deal with. So that's something I can pass on to you, and hopefully it'll help you if you decide to take it on yourself. After all the times I've had the SV up on the lift, it was nice to see what's behind all those undertrays, and you took a look at it at the same time I did for the first time. Getting back to what the main reason we're talking about all this, of course, saving money. If you have the skill set, doing your own service, that's where it's at, because next year, for sure, this car will need that 5,800 and change service. So whether or not I'll do it here or send it back to Beverly Hills, I don't know. It really depends on time. If I continue to spend all my time making YouTube videos and hang out on Instagram, then for sure I will have to send it back, but we'll see how it goes. Other than that, let's end on a good note. I'll see you next time.